Hello, folks, and welcome to the Double T Podcast. Today is a very special day on the Double T Podcast Network. With us, we have a very special guest, author of the book Food Americana, former ABC and NBC foreign news correspondent, domestic and foreign news correspondent, current radio host programming The Great American Songbook, and creator and producer of several television shows, including Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Currently on the Food Network, I'd like to welcome Mr. David Page.
Great to be here. What do I call you? Double T or Anthony or Tony or Chef?
Tony.
What are you?
Tony is great.
Okay, Tony, thanks for having me.
David, I must say that Food Americana was an amazing journey with a comedic flair, and it was so well written that I actually felt that I was sitting at the table.
Geez, Tony, the check is in the mail. Thank you.
That's right. That's great. I appreciate it. I've been looking for it. You covered great foods like barbecue, sushi, Chinese, pizza, ice cream, just to name a few, foods that Americans love. You introduced us to personalities, entrepreneurs, fishermen, chefs. And I'll say this as a chef. This book was a masterpiece. And for any foodie, it's a must read.
Thank you.
How much fun did you have writing this?
It was an absolute delight. I mean, one of the joys of being a journalist in any form of journalism is the ability to be invited into places most people don't get to go, and to meet interesting people, some of them famous, that most people don't get a chance to meet. And then on top of that, as a food-focused person, as someone who beyond journalism loves food in all its forms, this gave me entree to some of the most incredible people in the business. I interviewed Cecilia Chang, probably the most important person in the history of the development of Chinese food in America. She was 100 years old. She passed away about a year after I talked to her. But I interviewed her in her apartment in San Francisco. There had been a screw up about the time. She didn't know I was coming. She had to go to lunch, yet she still let me in, and we talked. This woman at 100 was decked out like a movie star. She was wearing understated, really expensive. She had a gray sweater and black slacks and a row of pearls. We sat there and talked, and she went to the other room and came back with a manila envelope in which was one of the original developmental menus for her groundbreaking restaurant, which opened in 1960, the Mandarin. It had strikeouts in blue pen and words added. You don't often get that kind of experience. I got to hang out with Tony Gemignani, probably the leading figure in American pizza these days, at one of his restaurants in San Francisco, where he runs the International School of Pizza. And he let me audit the class, which meant taking part in it for as long as I wanted. I went 4 of the 5 or 6 days. And the whole idea of learning pizza from a true expert, to be a journalist, you have to be curious. So anytime you can get inside something and be given access to the secrets, whether they're intentionally kept secret or not, but I knew nothing about the chemistry of how you make pizza. And it is chemistry. And I was also, as I write in the book, I was the dumb kid in the class. I mean, I was surrounded by people who, for the most part, already owned pizzerias and were trying to up their game. So I was the moron. But it was just a delight. And I got to talk to Alice Waters, and talking about bagels and lox, I got to talk to Mel Brooks. Just out of the blue, I sent him his production company an email explaining, I'm doing this book. I'm doing a chapter on bagels and lox. I knew he grew up poor in Brooklyn. Does he want to talk about bagels and lox? And they said, yes, call him at this number. So I called Mel Brooks, and we talked about bagels and lox. And of course, the foods I got to try. I went to the Memphis in May Barbecue Championship the last year before COVID. And it was a festival of pork fat. And it turns out that one of the top teams competing there was from a restaurant I'd put on diners in our first or second year. So I called them and said, "Hey, could I shadow you? Could I live with you guys and be a fly on the wall?" They had been grand champion twice, including the past year. They were trying to do it again. So the ability to hang out with them second by second, moment by moment, as they were trying to repeat, and they agonizingly did not by the tiniest hair. It was minimal points. But it was also the greatest pork I'd ever eaten in my life. I mean, this big whole hog just in this smoker that they had built into an old Willys Jeep. It was unbelievable. It was great. I had a wonderful time.
Tell me what was the one thing that you learned that was the most interesting, startling, revealing? What was the one thing, secret, that you learned that was most fascinating to you?
Well, this is going to sound kind of boring, but I'm Jewish. Uh-huh. I'm Jewish. I'm from New York. And I just assumed bagels and lox were, a Jewish thing passed on from Europe. In fact, bagels and lox did not exist in Europe. Jews in Europe did not eat lox. Even here, it was somewhat pricey. They ate a rather hard predecessor of the bagel. Bagels and lox didn't come to be until the completion of the transatlantic railroad. To be very interesting, you'd have to hold your breath. The transcontinental railroad in the 1800s, which allowed the transportation of salmon from the Pacific Northwest to the East Coast. But to get it there was no refrigeration. So it had to be packed in salt to preserve it. Well, that's the definition of lox, not the smoked salmon that most people call lox, but the original true lox from the belly of the salmon is incredibly salty and is not smoked. It's brined in salt. Well, it was invented by the simple fact of covering it in salt to get it from the West Coast to the East Coast. Concomitantly, around that time, there was a farmer in upstate New York who tried to make French Neufchâtel cheese. He failed and turned out something that he then called cream cheese. So the confluence of events, and no one can say when the lox met the cream cheese on the bagel. There's absolutely no record of it. There is a record of Breakstone, a Jewish-owned company. At the time, I'm sure they're owned by a multinational now. The Breakstone brothers advertising cream cheese as a good addition to Jewish foods in the Yiddish language Jewish newspaper, the Vorwärts, which translates into the Forward and which still exists today. It makes chemical sense because lox back then was incredibly salty, and both chemically and from a taste perspective, the cream cheese diffuses, it cuts the salt. Put it on a bagel, of course. Bagels were used for all sorts of things. Although early on, really, bagels were only topped with chicken fat or butter. But anyway, at some point in the 1800s, the three came together, and here in America, that classic dish was born.
Interesting. So tell me, how did you come up with the concept for diners, drive-ins, and dives?
Completely by accident. I had been in network news for many, many years, had gone out on my own, had a production company, and was starving. So I called a friend of mine who also had a production company who wasn't starving, Al Roker. When I was the co-producer of the Weekend Today show, he'd worked for me before moving on to the main show. And I called Al at his production company. I said, "Hey, I need some work. You got any?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm doing a bunch of stuff for the Food Network. Why don't you do some of it for me?" So I did, including a documentary on the history of the diner. After a while, you're not going to get rich working for someone else's production company. So quite amicably, I moved on and started pitching the Food Network myself. Now that I guess I was a food journalist because I'd been doing food stories. In my biz, you're whatever you were last. I've been an investigative journalist. I've been a foreign journalist, whatever. But so now I'm a food journalist, and I'm pitching the Food Network. And there's a very nice woman, a programming executive, who is taking my phone calls, which is tough in the first place in this business to get people to take your calls. And every time I called, she turned down all of my, what I thought were wonderful ideas. Finally, one day I'm on the phone with her. It's late in the afternoon/evening. I'm in a basement office in my house in Minnesota. Why Minnesota is a long story. We'll jump over anyway. And I'm pitching, and finally, out of desperation, trying to help me, she says, "Have you got anything else about diners?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely. I'm developing this terrific show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives." And I told her all about it. And she said, "That sounds interesting. We have a development meeting Tuesday. Get me a write-up, a one-sheet it's called, for a 1-hour special on Monday." So I hang up the phone, and I'm kind of conflicted because on the one hand, she's agreed to look at something. On the other hand, I was not developing a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I had at that instant made the name up, pulled it out of thin air, or a body part if you prefer. I did the same with my detailed description of what it would contain, just invented it all on the spot. Now I had to spend the next few days calling around the country. This was back when people used cell phones to make phone calls. I was calling around the country trying to find content for a 1-hour special. I did. I wrote it up. I delivered it on Monday. I had a meeting on Tuesday. And shortly thereafter, they commissioned a 1-hour special. It wasn't going to be a series. See, they had Guy Fieri, who had won their Next Food Network Star Contest. This was the second year they ran it. And at the time, they actually believed that the winners of these contests would turn out to be their future major stars. Guy is the only one who ever did that. Nonetheless, at the time, they had big plans for him, and they were looking for a primetime show to put him in. They had a couple of big production companies they had asked to come up with proposals. And in the meantime, this special seemed like, it was a fine idea to keep Guy's face in front of the audience. The special rated far more highly than they expected. The pitches from the big deal production companies. Remember, I'm just a pipsqueak. I'm some guy in a basement. I'm not Fremantle. Anyway, the pitches from whatever production companies they had asked to do this disappointed them. And very gingerly, they commissioned, because I was all they had left, a 1-season order of, I think it was 10 episodes. Of a half-hour show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Now, right out of the gate, we were a hit. Nonetheless, in that first season, after we'd been on the air a little bit and we were clearly a hit, they still confided in me. They said, "Look, I just want you to know that this show doesn't really have legs. There's a limited number of restaurants in the country that would qualify for this. So, maybe you'll get another season, maybe you'll get 2 seasons, but
let's can travel the country that much.
Yeah, let's keep the expectations low." I did the first 11 seasons. They're now in season 30 something. So, I did take that with a grain of salt at the time because a challenge is a challenge. So I guess I've rambled through the answer to how did I come up with Diners.
Once the concept turns into an idea, how does that idea go into reality? In other words, how do you make sure that you have the right host and the right crew and the right producers and the right everything to make this whole thing work cohesively?
TV is like running a restaurant. If there's a chef you trust at another restaurant and you need to hire a line cook or a sous chef, and your buddy, who you know is a great chef, says, "This guy's really good," that's what it takes for you to look at hiring him. It's a tight industry. So if you're looking for talented people in the TV industry, you already know many of them. The particular crew that we started with, I had shot with on other projects. Guy was given to me. I mean, I had no idea who Guy was. And after they said, let's do a special, I said, great, let's talk about talent. And they said, no, we have your talent. I said, who's that? They said, Guy Fieri. He won the Food Network Star Contest. Now, I had no idea who he was. I had no idea they had a Food Network Star Contest because I didn't watch the Food Network. So I went online and I Googled Guy, and I thought, I'm screwed. I mean, he looked like a cartoon,
Yeah.
And then when I talked to him, I was further worried because he was a lifelong West Coaster. Didn't really even know what a diner was. They have coffee shops out there. It's a different thing. Guy's perception of a diner was a place that serves burgers and is a greasy spoon. The good news is he has the most God-given talent of anyone I've ever worked with. And he was green as grass when I got him, but he sucked it up. He learned it very quickly. And on top of that, he has something no producer can teach. If you're good, I can make you better. If you're not good, I can't do anything with you. God has gifted him with the natural ability to pop through the screen and have a personality that makes people want to hang out with him. And in the final analysis, successful TV is nothing more than presenting the audience a character or person with whom they want to hang out, someone they like, someone like Tom Selleck, someone like James Garner, someone like Tyne Daly, and I'm dating myself by mentioning older people, but you have to want to spend time with this person in your house. I mean, hell, you may be sitting on the couch in your underwear. These have to be intimate relationships, and Guy has that. He's naturally that way.
At what point do you walk away from it?
Well,
I know when you walked away from it, but at what point do you normally walk away? Do you just create these things and walk away and go create something else, or do you hang around?
No, I got to be very careful what I say here for legal reasons. I'd have continued doing it. But I did not have the opportunity. That's all I can tell you.
Okay. No, I mean, some people just create things and walk away from them.
Well, here's the deal. My rule on when to walk away from something is when you lose control of it or can no longer produce it to the highest quality level that you demand. At the time I was doing diners, we would spend 23 hours in audio post-production on each episode, adding back in every clang and sizzle that you generally don't hear on a cooking show because of the noise from the overhead hood.
Gotcha.
I immodestly say my production standards are very, very high. And as long as I can produce something to my liking, that's great. If I can't, then that's not something I want to do.
Do you see the day when restaurants will go without servers post-COVID?
I see the day when many restaurants will go without servers. I mean, you've already got the fast casual model that, is sort of a restaurant, but you pick it up and bring it to your own table. I am concerned that the nature of dining out has changed substantially thanks to COVID, with a huge increase in takeout, drive-through, delivery, and ghost kitchens. Where there is no real restaurant. There's just a kitchen and the food is sent to people's houses and it's branded as a restaurant, but there's no brick and mortar. On the one hand, this dramatically reduces the opportunity for employees, for people to have jobs in the industry. On the other hand, and quite paradoxically, restaurants are screaming that they can't fill the jobs they have open now. And I am truly baffled by that. I think much of it may be you simply can't live on a restaurant wage. Certainly, if traffic in a restaurant is thinned down. I mean, this concept of people being paid, I don't know what the restaurant wage is now. It's probably $2 something, and then you're supposed to live on tips. That doesn't cut it. And I understand that if you pay your servers more and do not rely on tips, you're going to have to increase the price of food. But I think that's a reality. I think it's going to have to happen.
Maybe you can explain this to me.
Probably not, but I'll try.
America's fascination with Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. I can't see why anybody would pay $5 for a cup of coffee, and I don't see Dunkin' Donuts attraction anything more than convenience. I would just as soon go into a Cumberland Farms and pay 99 cents for a cup of coffee, which is just as good as any Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks that I've ever had.
Well, remember, Dunkin' Donuts really made their mark at a time when almost nothing was open overnight. I was an investigative reporter for a good part of my career, especially my early career, and I met a lot of cops at Dunkin' Donuts at odd hours. The joke about cops and donuts could be refashioned into a joke about where the hell do you go when you're working third shift. I don't know what Dunkin' charges anymore for a cup of coffee.
It's not Dunkin' Donuts anymore.
Well, they've changed their name. They're no longer. They see themselves as a beverage company. That's part of their corporate statements. They're the stuff they file with the SEC. They're officially a beverage company, which I find, I guess, sad because I like Dunkin' Donuts from the old days. But no, this is going to be my next book. I'm doing a whole chapter on beverages and the grab and go beverage society we've become. But Starbucks doesn't sell coffee. Starbucks sells illusion. It, as Howard Schultz said, the third place, neither work nor home, where you can feel comfortable. And they sell the opportunity to sit in an armchair and think you're being hip. And frankly, what's bizarre is the majority of their drinks now are, I believe this is true. If it's not accurate, it's close. They're moving much more toward cold drinks in terms of what consumers want from them. Now, there's a different element to Starbucks, which is drive-through and convenience, but they managed to establish themselves as a desirable, aspirational product, despite the fact that their coffee tastes like leopard piss. I've read for my next book all three of Howard Schultz's autobiographies where he talked about how great the coffee is. From what I believe, I haven't proven it, but it's been said to me, the allegation is that Starbucks buys cheap, bad coffee, burns it on purpose to make you think that it is some sort of deep roast, and has convinced America that this is what coffee should taste like. That's crap. But look, you want to talk about so much of consumption of edible products, I separate that from edibles, is based on selling a perception of lifestyle. I mean, there's a water out there, I think it's called Death Water, I'm not sure, that came to be, it's sold in big aluminum cans like a big beer with all sorts of hip artwork. The people who created that product started with the idea of the can and the hipness, and then went and found a place to get water from. Turns out to be overseas. But the point is, they knew there was a niche in the market for people to drink water in situations where it might be uncool not to drink alcohol. So they sold it based on that. I mean, let's face it, Applebee's running commercials to make you think that's your local bar, and people buying into that, that's insane. But that's how so much of what we eat or drink is marketed to us. Boy, that sounded grumpy, didn't it? I'm just a pissed off old man, huh?
You are. Let's talk about pizza.
Let's talk about pizza.
Now, you're a Jersey guy.
Yeah.
I'm a New Haven guy.
Yeah, so that's not pizza. You're eating a seafood thing.
Oh, come on now.
No, it's good. I like it. It's fine. Of course, you don't call it pizza. You call it a pizza.
A pizza.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So where I came from, now I've been living up in Western Massachusetts for the last 36 years.
Yeah, always known as the home of great pizza.
Second to none. So I want to talk about, though, let's talk about pizza and what you've discovered in your book about pizza.
Yeah, well, pizza has a remarkable story in that it started out as the poorest food of the poorest of the poor in southern Italy. What could be more basic than some dough and a little tomato, which is all that pizza was when it was created in Naples. If you were lucky, if you had a couple extra bucks, you could buy a piece of lard, literally, or cut a piece of lard out of a hog and put it on top of your pizza. But that's all it was. The pizza napolitano of wonderfulness came later. And these, when poverty in Naples and other parts of southern Italy was so extreme that a huge migration took place of southern Italians to the United States, they attempted to bring pizza with them, as all immigrant groups do. Bring what is comforting and what you know with you. The problem is when they got to the States, the protein content of wheat here is different than the protein content of wheat there. Ovens that they found in New York were fueled by coal versus the ovens in Naples fueled by wood. And as a result, the pizza had a different crunch and texture to it. So right off the bat, pizza was being modified in the United States.
Every culture's foods that have come to this country, and I've talked to a lot of international students from UMass, every culture's foods that have come to this country have become Americanized. They've been bastardized and they've become American.
No, they have not been bastardized. They have been changed. See, if you think of it as this is a poor representation of what's really eaten in Naples, that's not fair. What this is our evolution and modification of the idea of what was in Naples. Now, we've done that to every cuisine based on tastes here, more importantly, on the availability of ingredients here. Additionally, food continues to evolve. So foods evolve. Well, for example, people complain that Chinese food in Chinese American restaurants is not authentic. Well, of course it's not authentic. It's an evolved cuisine of its own. But cuisine is evolving back in China, too. One of the most popular dishes among young people in China today is scrambled eggs and tomatoes. Now, that's not what the food snob sitting at the table complaining about your lo mein is thinking. All food evolves. All food cultures evolve. What happened in the U.S. was, first of all, the immigrants found out that being poor here was a little better than being poor there, because given the economic situation here, even if you were poor, you could afford some meat. And the concept of abbondanza, abundance, the fact that red sauce Italian American cuisine has a history of being served in massive portions, arose from the realization that, holy crap, we can afford food. Once that happened, it was natural to put it on pizza. But beyond that, Italian American immigrants didn't just stay in New York. You ended up with movement to other cities and other regions. And when you get to another place, as your food continues to evolve, it evolves with a hint of what's local. You talk about New Haven, where clam pizza developed, even though the clams, as I recall, didn't initially come from the waters off New Haven. They were brought in from Rhode Island. I can't explain that. Anyway, you get to, so there's an Italian American community in St. Louis. There is a local cheese in St. Louis called Provel. It's kind of a processed, God knows what, it's in the same family as Velveeta, I guess, but tastes differently. That's what St. Louis style pizza is topped with. In Detroit, a guy started making pizza in oblong-shaped auto pans. I think they were oil pans. I'm not sure. That had been liberated from either one of the big three factories or a parts supplier. And the locals loved that, and it turned into Detroit-style pizza, which is now having a big moment all across the country, and on and on and on. But it's based on local preferences, local tastes, and that's why pizza has become. I mean, there's 30 kinds of pizza, if not more, in the U.S. defined by styles. There's Trenton tomato pie and there's Jersey tomato pie, and they're not the same. It's and I don't remember what the difference is, so don't ask me.
And I remember when my grandmother used to make her Sicilian pizza, and that was authentic.
Yeah, that to me, that's a deep dish pizza. To me, Chicago deep dish is a casserole.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah,
and all there was it was just thick the thick dough with the fresh tomato sauce and sprinkled grated cheese, and that was it.
Fresh, simple, basil, fresh wonderful. Yeah, pizza. See, one of the things that bugs me about what has happened to pizza, especially as promulgated by the chains, is that the concept has become put on as much of everything as you can. Yeah. And I am of the culinary school that prefers simplicity. I want good ingredients allowed to shine. And, it's my preferred way of eating, but that's.
What else is New Haven famous for, David?
First hamburger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, except it isn't.
Come on.
Louis' Lunch.
Yeah.
Or Louis Lunch. I don't know how you pronounce it. I talked to the owner.
Louis' Lunch.
Yeah, I talked to the owner for the book. Look, they have been making broiled grilled beef patties since what? It was 18 something. Yeah. And they call them hamburgers. Now, they're served between toasted white bread. Is that a hamburger? Maybe not. Even if they are the first recorded instance of a hamburger being made, there are a number of other restaurants and chefs who claim it. Because, look, here's the bottom line. After German immigrants brought the hamburger steak to the United States, it was inevitable that someone was going to put it on some kind of bread. It is also likely that whoever did it first, that event was not recorded for posterity. What I love about Louis' Lunch, and I mean this in a good way, is that they claim that the governor, the state gave them a citation certifying them as the first hamburger. If you read the citation carefully, it says that they say they're the first hamburger. Yeah. But no, it's a great place. I mean, it's as best I can tell, it's just as it's always been. And the owner, whose name I now forget, but it was his grandfather who started the place, is a delightful man and talked to me at great length. I mean, they still use the original vertical gas-fired broilers.
Those are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah, it's look, that is a unique restaurant doing something by hand their way. All restaurants should be that.
Consistent?
Yeah, and they care.
That is the biggest word in the restaurant business.
Of course it is.
And if you can do it consistently, I always say you can sell mediocre food consistently, you can make money.
Unfortunately, that's true. But it's better when you make good food.
It's better when it absolutely is. So listen, before we wrap up, I want to ask you a question about your ABC, NBC News days. Now, I understand that you worked with one of the best old timers in the business. Who was that?
Garrick Utley. Garrick was NBC's chief international correspondent, later went to CNN, who was an erudite, refined, educated, multilingual, just a great journalist. And when he would come to Europe, he would often not bring his regular producer, and I was the guy he worked with. And it was just a delight. I mean, I remember he turned to me at one point and said, "I hope you don't mind if I conduct this interview in Russian." I said, "No, I don't mind, Garrett. Go ahead."
I have to ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience. I know that there's a story out there. I'm not sure if you're willing to tell us, but would you tell the Muammar Gaddafi story?
Sure, I'd be glad to, but I just want to make certain everyone understands that I was not disparaging anyone who is non-binary. I was passing on to him what was on the front page of the New York Post. Okay, so here we go. This was in 80 something. United States military had bombed his house, causing, I mean, he had several houses, but bombed his house, causing great damage, and it appears killing an adopted child, which, well, that doesn't matter whose child it is, that's not good. But I got the first interview with Gaddafi after that, he was in Tripoli at the time. And they wouldn't let me bring my own crew. They were going to provide a crew and tape it and give me the tape. And so I think I was blindfolded on that occasion. I've been blindfolded to be taken a number of places. Anyway, so they take me to his house. And first they give me a tour of the house. And I can point out that he had a round blue velvet armed Hugh Hefner style bed with hi-fi controls in the blue velvet arms of the bed, which kind of cracked me up. Anyway, I'm brought in to meet him, and I do a standard interview. And Gaddafi speaks well, not anymore, he's dead. He spoke damn good English. I won't say it's perfect, but he understood and he could speak. But for political reasons, he would often insist on a translator, and he would speak Arabic. So he had a translator there, and I'm asking him all the normal political questions one would expect. And then I ask my last question, which is the New York Post, quoting CIA sources, recently reported that you like to cross-dress and use a lot of psychotropic drugs. In fact, they put a mocked-up picture of you on the front page in which you were wearing a dress and pumps. Would you like to comment on that? The translator, well aware that people who pissed Gaddafi off got shot, looked at me in astonishment, and it was clear he was not going to translate this question. But as I said, Gaddafi spoke English, and he burst out laughing. And then he blamed it all on Zionists. But yeah, so I asked Muammar Gaddafi if he liked to wear a dress.
And at least he laughed, and you're here to give this.
It was hilarious. It was absolutely, the look on that interpreter's face was absolutely priceless.
Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Well, David, I'm glad you lived to tell the Gaddafi story.
Thank you.
I sincerely would like to thank you for taking your time out to come on to our show and talk about your book, talk about your experiences, and talk about the shows that you've been involved with. And you're certainly a man with many stories to tell. And I certainly hope we have this opportunity to do this again, because I would love to have you back on at some point, and I would love to hear more of your stories, because you are absolutely a fascinating man, and you have been a tremendous guest, and all of us here at the Double T Network are very grateful to you for coming on, and I have to thank you.
I'm grateful, very grateful that you invited me. I've had a wonderful time, and I'd be glad to come back anytime.
And my dinner invitation stands.
It's a deal. You got it.
We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Tony.
All right. Thanks a lot, David.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.